I came here to talk to you about a book which was recently published, unfortunately in Greek, which is a very short and little market. But I hope within a year it will be also available in English. Why should I come to Napoli to talk about this book? You can ask Giovanni. But the idea is that the interest of the Athenian apartment building goes beyond those who are interested in the city of Athens. And through what I'm going to say about this book, I hope I will convince you that it's worth coming here and talk about what is happening in this city's apartment block. So all my academic life, I have been focused on methodologies which are much more macroscopic, not focused on qualitative methodologies and data. I'm dealing mainly with statistical models, big data sets, census, coming from censuses with hundreds of thousands of, and the general idea is to find patterns of changes or of structures within an urban unit, but not really going deep into the stories of individual stories. And my thinking is much more inductive than deductive. This book is different. It's about stories, based on interviews. And in terms of market and sales, for the first time in my life, this book is really successful. The other ones, you can find them after 5 years, they are still there. There are those interested in those books I know them. This one was out of print within a month, because it's a book addressed not only to the academic audience, but to a larger audience, even within the small market of Greek speakers and Greek readers. Uh, those who are sensitive about what's happening in the city were really have really appreciated this book, and it was out of print within a month. So this book is focused on stories of people who have lived or still live in such apartment blocks. I will tell you a bit more what is an apartment block in Athens. Um, these apartment blocks were mainly built between the mid 1950s and the end of 1970s. It was the period where you had a building boom in Athens, and when the city had a, a, a rapid increase in its population. After the Second World War and after the Civil War, which followed the German occupation in Athens, um, you had an increase of the city's population from 1,300,000 to 3 million in the early 80s. So it was a very steep increase. Uh, and this housing stock still hosts about 70% of the population of the center of the city, the central municipality of the city, the so-called the municipality of Athens. The municipality of Athens has about 650,000 people within a metropolitan area, which is about between 3.5 and 4 million people. So it's relatively reduced, but it's the most dense part of the city and the most high-rise area. Um, these apartment blocks, uh, I would qualify them as the apartment blocks of the many, the plebeian apartment blocks. Before the Second World War, during the interwar period, you had the first erection of about 1,000 apartment buildings of 5 stories or a little bit higher, which were absolutely destined to the elite, to the bourgeoisie and the high bourgeoisie of the city. And they were located on the main avenues of the city and the very central areas of the city. After the Second World War, you don't have anymore 1,000, but you have 35,000 such buildings that were erected all over the central areas of Athens, and destined not to the elite anymore, but to a very broad consumers group. And you can see, even without knowing much about the city, that the interwar period apartment building is absolutely different in terms of quality construction, in terms of modernity and architectural aspect, in terms of not so much size. The plebeian is a bit smaller because it's not on very big plots. It's on small plots and narrow streets. So usually it doesn't have two different doors, main door and service door. It's one door, one elevator, a few apartments. The average size of this apartment building is 15 apartments within. If you have an apartment building with 40 apartments, it's a big one. So why is this construction, why is this building interesting beyond Athens? The main thing, in my view, is that this plebeian apartment block brings together different people. It's not in terms of class or in terms of ethnicity a homogeneous unit. Why does it bring different people inside it? Because it provides different quality of living within it. And this different quality is stratified according to floor. In the case of Athens, you have a kind of vertical segregation, let's say, but opposite to the well-known example of vertical segregation in Paris in late 19th century Paris, of course, where you had the nice apartments, high ceiling and well decorated and with all amenities. You had them on the first, second floor. And then as you went up, the quality, the ceiling was becoming, the, the height of the ceiling was reduced, and you went to the top, under the roof, the chambre de bonne, where you had the service personnel, tiny rooms with dropping rain inside and all the problems of that time. in Athens, you have the opposite. Those at the top are, are the privileged ones with relatively large apartments, more view, more openness, balconies, because you have a construction model which is called retire, uh, again a French word meaning that the apartment after the fourth floor is retiré, withdrawn from the facade line, so that in narrow streets especially, you have some sun for the floors at the inferior levels. If you had 7 floors, it would be really dark at the bottom. But even with the retire model, you have very dark small apartments at the bottom. So providing a different quality of housing within the same apartment building, you you sell it, its price or its rent is different upstairs or downstairs. So within a market and within an unregulated market, because the Greek housing market is absolutely laissez-faire, within such conditions, you have different people at the bottom and different people at the top. So it's interesting that you have in the micro scale of one apartment building, you have different people. And this is not only different in terms of class, in terms of occupational category or social status, but you also have different people in terms of ethnicity. Greece was not an immigration country until the 90s at least. In 1991, you had only 2% of migrants. And these migrants, more than half of them were coming from developed economy countries, like from Italy or from France or from Switzerland. After the 1990s and the collapse of the socialist states, socialist bloc, the situation has changed radically. And in 2001, you have in Athens more than 10% of immigrants, and in 2011, more than 12% in the whole metropolitan area of Athens. In the city of Athens, the municipality of Athens, the center of Athens, you have more than 20% of migrants. And these migrants are mainly coming from developing economy countries. So usually they are poor migrants. So class and ethnicity are to a large extent combined. However, contrary to different contexts, in the Athenian mapping of class and ethnicity, you have two different patterns. The city, in terms of class, is mainly divided to the... Not me.
Sorry.
No problem. Maybe it's a remark. Okay. So, different patterns of class and ethnicity. In terms of class, Athens is divided to the western part, which is mainly working class part of the city, and in terms of ethnicity, you have a concentration of poor migrants in the center of the city, in several parts of the center of the city, and less in the semi-periphery, and again, a concentration in the outer periphery of the city. And the question is why you don't have um, a similar pattern of poor locals living in some areas and poor migrants living in the same areas? There, the answer is tenure, because local working class households have managed in the past to access home ownership in the suburbs of the working class. There, you don't have access to housing for rent for new migrants coming from other countries. So they had to find an access to housing somewhere else. And where did they find this access? In this Athenian apartment block, in the small apartments, the disadvantaged apartments of these Athenian apartment blocks, which was as a stock abandoned steadily since the 70s from Greek households, going to the suburbs and emptying this stock. So it was the only option massively available for poor migrants coming to Athens since the early 1990s. So one thing is this social and ethnical mix that you find in these apartment buildings. Why is this mix provided? I told you because it provides different quality of housing on different floors. But why does this apartment block provide this different quality of housing? This is due to the construction, the building system it was implemented by. And this is the so-called land for flat system. The Greek word is antiparochi. In English, it's you give land and you take flats. You give land and you take flats through a very specific procedure. You are a small landowner having a plot in the city, and you can start a joint venture with a small builder, and you sign a contract saying that I give you the plot, you put the money, the builder, and the skill to erect the building, and at the end of the works, you get one shop and three apartments, and I, the builder, get the other shop and five apartments. Depending on where your plot is, the proportion of what you get and what the builders get is different. If you were at the very center of the city, you, as a landowner, you will get much more than if you are in a low price semi-periphery of the area. This this antiparochi system, this land for flat system, has been reproduced constantly without producing a concentration of capital. You had for several decades the same pattern: small builder, small landowner. Why? Because even if you were a big construction firm, you didn't have advantages in this process. You could do, let's say, 20 buildings instead of one for a small builder, but you would get the same percentage of profit for the 20 as you would get for one. And why was this happening? Because the market was regulated, protecting small players against big players. And this was a political decision, a political regulation implemented by the popular right parties that were in power from the end of the Civil War to the 80s. So during all the, the, the peak of this building boom, and it was a kind of part and a pillar of the political system, the clientelist political system, where you got electoral support for your party, negotiating access to home ownership for more than the people who you would expect, those who have money. You you could include in this access to home ownership many more people than expected. Within a period, of course, where you had a very high social mobility trend. through education, through a small business which was sustainable, and through home ownership. And this was something that reproduced the power of the conservative popular right party. And it was not directly, but indirectly negotiated also with big capital. The big construction firms did not have profit to go into house building. So they didn't invest in house building. But they had other possibilities. They went to public works. And there it was their garden. They could do whatever they wanted. And big capital had other choices, ship owners, another kind of investing for big capital. Home housing was not also an option for banks, for private banks. It was not until the mid 90s. Until then, you had only public loans for housing. The private banks were excluded from this thing. It was when the housing market started becoming more unprotected, that private banks were inside. But they started getting in housing since the mid 90s, when the building boom was had stopped for a long time. So this protection of small players created an environment, a social environment of negotiation, which permitted for a long time access to home ownership for a large part of society. And this was a political bargain. So this land for flats system is not only a building system, it's it had very important economic outcomes, because it was the building boom at that period was the locomotive of the economy. And at the same time, it was a political pillar of the system. So it's not one-dimensional thing. At that period, housing did not appear as a social issue. It was a problem that you thought it was solved by itself. This protection of small players was rather invisible in terms of appearing as a natural thing, as something that should have been done, is done because it's like this. And this is what made housing for Greece and for Athens not a social issue. Even today, where you have very strong problems of housing and accessibility to housing through rent or home ownership, prices are skyrocketing. On the table, on the political table and on the social table, you don't have movements that that claim housing as a social right. It will come if the situation still continues to be like this. But we didn't start from zero. We started from minus 20. So it's so this apartment building with all its history, beyond Athens, raises question about microsegregation. Microsegregation. What does it mean? It means segregation at the micro scale in comparison with neighborhood segregation. The rich live there and the poor live somewhere else. Here, you have them in a mix, and it's a form of microsegregation. In this book about vertical cities, you have evidence of microsegregation in 20 different cities across the planet. All these forms of microsegregation are not the same. It's not vertical segregation. It can have many different things. So in Athens, you have this form of microsegregation. What does it mean? How does it affect social reproduction? The answer is not obvious. And similar question, how is this social mix affecting social reproduction? From the Chicago school and different optics, for some time you thought that if you bring people together, if you reduce spatial distance, you also reduce social distance. This is far from reality. And at the same time, if you take them apart, it's a different context. How can you compare these things? And it's another issue, but the book is also related to this question of how social mix can affect social reproduction. Now the very concise, let's say, prehistory of the book, it it started with a research project, a 30-month research project we started in 2020, without knowing that the pandemic would come. We didn't have the astrologers bubble that we could feel that. And it was focused on doing qualitative research in apartment buildings within the broader center of Athens. And we did more than 300 interviews in 132 apartment buildings in Athens. Here you can see the little dots, the buildings that are included in the book. But if you have very sharp eyes, there are other dots which you have to be as close as me to the board, that indicate also the rest of the 130. So if you see all the dots, you see that they are more or less everywhere within this area of the central municipality, and sometimes a little bit outside. But in the very dense and high-rise stock of the... And this was because we wanted to have a view from different social profile areas of the city. The COVID pandemic has affected our project, and it has affected it in a positive way. Because initially we were a team of 8 people, and the plan was that we would do these interviews more or less the 8 people. And the plan was that we would go to buildings that we didn't know, and they didn't know us, and we knocked the doors, and we would get the interviews. During the pandemic, this was impossible. So we expanded our team from 8 to 30 people within incorporating to the team mainly students from our classes or people we knew, and each one did interviews within her circle, family, friends, whatever. This was very beneficial because it expanded the eyes and at the same time, it was negative in because it limited the social profile of what we did. So this book is mainly an approach of middle class eyes. You will see that most of our stories are related to apartments that are from the average height of apartments in apartment blocks and higher, and much less from lower apartments, small apartments, migrants. So it's a middle class view of what happens in and the stories of disadvantaged people and disadvantaged places is through the eyes of middle class. They are not absent, but they are mediated. So the limits are limits. The structure of the book. It has 37 stories, different stories, not homogeneous. Some stories are small, some are extended, some are for people who are old and have a long trajectory. Others are for very young, and so the and some are related to one apartment. Some are related to a trajectory through many. So, and these stories can be read also as literature. It's it's a story, and maybe this has made the success of this book because it's stories of the people living next door. And uh, what we are getting as impressions about this book is that I felt that I was part of it. I felt that a similar thing came to my mind because this story was very similar with mine or with what I know. Apart from these 37 stories, there are 7 theoretical texts. We tried to hide them a little bit so that we don't put them in front and the reader says, oh my God, I have to read these theoretical texts. So we put them in slices between the stories, and these theoretical texts are a little bit summing up what comes out of it. So a, a, a theoretical story of what comes out of the detail of. We were 4 editors and 26 authors of the stories. And a very important input for this book was the artistic page making, the artistic handling of this book. And if we if we had a publisher, a common publisher, they would never invest. I don't know how much money they invested, but it's much more than a common publisher would invest. This is the Onassis Foundation publications. They're not so much interested in how much money they can make out of this book. This is a good thing. What they want is that their profile is heightened by having published this book. So this was a win-win thing. It has photos, many photos that again a publisher, a common publisher, who it's the cost is and good and good quality. And at the beginning, the idea was to use a professional photographer to go to each building, take photos, and things like that. But in the process, they they said, and we also felt, and we agreed absolutely, that if you put a professional photographer, then the outcome is an exhibition of the style of the photographer. So the first alternative was not put one professional photographer, but three or four. Then it's a collective exhibition of professional photographers. And the team, the artistic team that put up the page making of the book, said it's better that we use the amateur, 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 not the amateur, not professional. Yes. These photographs that each interviewer took with his or her phone. And not so good, not so, they improved the quality, but it's still a mobile photo. But it's more real than a professional photographer that frames everything in. So the book is expressing this thing, and there are a few diagrams that sum up a little bit what you get from these stories, and especially it sums up this vertical segregation, and I will tell you a few things later. Now, stories. I don't know if how much how.
Come voi più o meno forse 20 minuti.
20 minutes.
You still have 20 minutes.
Ah, too much. Yeah. I have 14 different stories in the. Maybe it's not important to go through each story. You can read them in the presentation, which is also translated in Italian. So all these 14 different stories are really different. And as I said sometime before, some are short, some are big. This first story is about a building which was built in the 60s with a family origin, and two families being the owners and living there. And because it's a particular part of the city, at the next generation, they sold apartments and they went away. Now the initial families are not there. Chinese companies have made acquisitions there. Refugee projects are present there. Migrants and refugees are there. Uneasy cohabitation situations are there. So I think only Airbnb is not there. Everything else is there. But probably Airbnb is next door. It's coming at you. So you have many different trends that happen in the city within the same building. Another story is about one building being inhabited uniquely by a Greek origin and family related and things like that. So built in 1970, it remains through generations in the more or less the same pattern of home ownership. And the building next door is absolutely unmaintained, inhabited mainly by poor migrants. So microsegregation is not necessarily within one building, but it can be microsegregation between two adjacent buildings. Another thing is one of my stories. This is a little bit visual sociology, let's say. I had a small operation, a medical operation, and I was for 5 hours in a window seeing that building. And you could, it's a little bit. And I wrote what you can see from outside, from a building, a visual interpretation of a building. A story of a colleague that her mother was leaving her when she was preschool age at the second floor apartment and there is and she took an interview from the old lady now that she was taking care of it of her 20 years ago. A Jewish family apartment, long story. This is the portraits of people who went to Auschwitz and never came back. Very long story and dramatic. And how this Jewish minority a bourgeois family within, was inside and outside of the Athenian bourgeoisie. And another building in the good part, the nice part of the center of Athens, which changed across time. Now it's more offices than apartments. And this story describes how social relations in the 60s and 70s were very different from now, and how young girls, servants from rural areas that serviced as domestic personnel, middle class households, were the joining link with the concierge households and the petty merchants in the neighborhood were the joining material of the neighborhood relations in that period. And this has faded away through the years. Another big one, 48 apartments, which is big for Athens, but you see in this anonymous and impersonal building two old ladies that are widows. Widows. Thank you. Widows in apartments on the first floor, living alone. What they do is they open the doors so that they feel they are together. It's another kind of story with an old Greek lady serviced by a Sri Lankan, trajectories of people who have never met, but who developed a very tight link at the end of the life of the Greek old lady. Another building at the really center of the bourgeois neighborhood of Athens, where an old couple with declining, socially declining careers, have these declining careers was stopped by the fact that they have this property. This has changed. Otherwise, they would have gone to hit the bottom. Another story of a young postdoctoral student who is living in an Airbnb area very near the Acropolis, and for some reason he escaped eviction, while all his entourage is pushed to Kypseli, which is the trendy area of. We went there, but under strong rain, and so two different buildings and two different stories, and a, a refurbishment of an apartment showing very punctual gentrification in the center of Athens. It's not gentrification of all the neighborhood, but here and there. And long story again. Semi-basements, how is it, the lowest part of the building. Now the market is selling it. And I was asked to give them an interview for a lifestyle magazine. And the title was "The View is in the same, the semi-basements." View in the same. Uh, uh, what this means is that we now can sell you semi-basements, especially if you are a foreigner. And this is a story that links a very crucial part of the housing market. These small semi-basement apartments are a little bit like Bassi in Napoli. And they acted for many years as a de facto social housing, because no gentrifier would like to go there. Because even if you invest money, it remains a semi-basement. But when you have the occasional tourist gentrifier who comes for a week or 10 days, it's not so important that you don't have a view seeing Vesuvio or the Acropolis. You came to Napoli or to Athens to go to the museums, to go to the... And it's important that the place is refurbished, clean, and well located. The 2 stations from the Acropolis Museum. That's enough. So now this kind of housing moves from a use value, living there, to an investment project, an investment item. So if there is a demand for that, the small landowner either has the money, and you don't need so much money, even less than 10,000 euros. And instead of getting a rent of 150 or 200 euros per month, you can imagine that you will get 500, 700 per month. So your calculations push you to do something about it. And the regulation of the market is such that pushes you towards that, because there is taxation for possessing a property, not so much for transactions. The transaction tax that was the traditional thing was 10 to 11%. Now it's 3%. So it enables transitions It enables movement within the market. But now the tax of possessing something has been 8 times more important than in the past. So you're not allowed, you're not given the opportunity to leave your property alone. So this creates a problem for those who live in these areas. And for them, there is no alternative. Since you are in a city and a country which has no alternatives, social rent for low cost and things like that. No social housing for rent at all. And the last story. These things are coming from quantitative research and many hundreds of thousands of cases, and you can see that there is vertical segregation in terms of class and in terms of ethnicity. I'm not going to explain it, but you can see it if you want later, and also size of apartments by floor and home ownership much more at the top and almost insignificant at the bottom. And the mapping of vertical segregation, which is especially for geographers, it's a challenge because how do you map vertical segregation, which is in that dimension, and you have to map it in the two-dimensional space of a map. I I will not go to this detail, and this is the same map for ethnic vertical mapping. But here, maybe 1 minute, are the diagrams of different πολυκατοικίες, apartment blocks that are part of the book. And in contrast with the diagrams I showed earlier with the hundreds of thousands of cases, here you have in real terms what's happening. So in a building, you have no foreigners. Foreigners are in yellow colors, and green are locals. So you see that every case of a building is different, but when you sum them up, there is a kind of pattern that comes out. And the same applies for class differences. So it's a different thing to focus on the detail and a different thing to focus on the general pattern. This is the last diapo. Are these stories adding up? To some extent, they do add up. In the spirit I showed in the previous diapo. Stories are framed by reality and in their agglomerated, aggregated in their agglomeration, they are also framing. So it's between detail and theory, there is an interaction. It's not top down, it's not bottom up, but it's working both ways. And also something that I didn't have the time to expand on, space and time is also coming out from these stories, because you have different stories or slightly different stories in bourgeois neighborhoods and in more low-income neighborhoods. And you have different stories for the 60s, for the 80s, for the 2000s, and for now. And this space and time gives you the opportunity to see that all this is not a photo. It's a process that is changing. And you have stories of people and stories of buildings. The stories of people are shorter than the stories of buildings, unless the building was very not so old or not so well built, so it collapses. Um, so there are many different things that build up the whole picture, and this picture is constantly changing. So thank you, and
Io